San Pedro Baptist Church Cemetery. The sun is cooking. San Pedro Cemetery, 1981. And it goes to tell you some of the people: McNeese, Walker, Alford. Signed 1989 by Randy Walker and Fred Alford. Not a big cemetery. I got a couple family members buried in here. A couple people I know. And I've done some research, a couple interesting people here. We have a flagpole here at the entrance. No flag on it. Please remove your old flowers and trash. It is a fenced cemetery. Let's slip in here if we know anybody. First one we walk up on here, Mr. John T. McNeese. Now, if you watch the Carlton Cemetery video, you may remember me talking about Freddie McNeese. I mentioned Mr. John T. in that as a well driller. This is a long family line of well drillers. Mr. John T. was 80 when he passed, and not only was he a well driller, he was also a U.S. veteran. He had served in the U.S. Army Air Force during the time of World War II. His wife, Miss Alma. When Mr. John T. put our well down when I was a child, I'll never forget. He took the drop pipe and pumped out some with his hand by working it up and down. Handed me a glass of it. I was probably about 14, 13. He said, try that. He's also got another marker here at the foot that tells about his World War II, U.S. Army Air Force. Miss Elsie Fudge. I come across her name while I researched her husband, Charlie. According to what I'd read in her obituary, she was a retired supervisor for the food services that served Dixie County school system. She was a native of Suwannee County and had lived in Perry for 55 years. So she was a Suwannean by birth. Didn't personally know Miss Fudge or Mr. Fudge. Old Ross Stewart. I knew Ross. Ross was part of David Stallin's bunch. Great skills as a mechanic. He'd do about anything. Seemed like he worked for the gas department for a while too, if I remember right. But I remember Ross. Ross loved to hunt, fish, about anything outdoors. Ross got a brother named Chris Stallin. I knew Chris too very well. Know the whole family. Ed and Ethel Hunter. Most of you may remember the name Hunter Grocery. Down 98, it's a paint store now. I don't know, it's something totally different, but they lived right next door to it in a house that's now gone. My mama and their granddaughter had a beauty shop together and worked around each other for years. Miss Sunday. I remember Ed and Miss Ethel from way back, more Miss Ethel. They had a lady working there too. She's buried over in Pineview Memorial Gardens, named Ella Red. Everybody just called her Miss Red. But Ed Hunter and Ethel Hunter, Hunter Grocery on Highway 98. Just as a last little note there, I'm pretty sure Miss Hunter was a Massey by birth. I'm almost positive of that. Don't hold me to that, I believe that though. Mr. Harold Padgett. I didn't know Mr. Harold, I just thought it was interesting here on his headstone. He was a U.S. Navy veteran, World War II, Tokyo Bay Occupation Force, TE-31. He was definitely a veteran. Gary, Michael, and Sharon Bowden. Now, when you're interested in figuring out how to be able to figure out some of Taylor County's history that's not really talked about, this is one of the ways you do it. If you look on both them headstones, they both have the same day of deceased, November 1st, 1983. I know the story of those kin to me. Let's see. Let's break it down for you. I showed you my grandma Frances and my grandpa Cleveland, which was the people that owned Holmes's Grill for a long while. I told you Cleveland was my step-grandfather. So my blood grandfather on my mama's side would have been my grandma Frances's previous husband, in which my mama, my Aunt Pat, and my Uncle Chris were born to a guy from Lafayette, Florida named Theater Revels. Theater had a sister named Betty. Betty married a fella named Bill Bowden. I know this is getting deep, but Bill had some previous children. Miss Sharon was one of those children. So to really simplify that to you, that would make her my second step cousin. They still have, I know, at least a son around Perry. I think that was it, but there may be more than that. I didn't really know her, I just know the story of what happened. But that's how you find this stuff. You go through cemeteries and you look at these stones and you read them, and then you see some of them where they have these death dates that match, and then you can start doing your research, and that's how you come across that. A lot of walkers in this cemetery. A whole lot of walkers. Mr. Irvin Close. Now, I didn't know Mr. Irvin either, but doing a little bit of research when I came into here on some of my family members, I come across some of his stuff in just the cemetery. He served in the U.S. Army and was stationed in the Philippines with the 343rd Quartermasters. He moved his family here in 1962. He was actually born in Wyoming County, New York. He was employed here as a truck driver for the Perry Lumber until he retired in 1990. Now, most people retire and go home. According to Mr. Close's obituary, that's not what he was into. On his 78th birthday, his daughter took him down to do the Richard Petty driving experience at the Daytona International Speedway. On his 78th birthday, you know, so he was still stretching it out. He wasn't done then. When he was 80 years old, he went with, I believe it said his son, skydiving at 80 years old. He was 90 when he died. You know, makes you wonder what else he might have done in that last 10-year stretch. Yeah, I didn't know Mr. Close, but that I know of, you know, I may have met him at the feed store or something, I don't know, but I bet he was a sport model. Matter of fact, right here at the bottom, he's got his military plaque. Another veteran. Miss Beth Register. Now, I didn't know Miss Beth, but upon researching this, I come across something that was stated in her, and I believe it was stated about her, I believe it was during her obituary, that in today's world, I think everybody should know people like this. I wished I'd have knew her. She was actually listed in her obituary in one of the statements. I think it was an obituary. It might not have been an obituary. It might have just been an ad in the paper. She was one of the only employees that Walmart ever had to reprimand for being too nice. I guess because maybe her lines wasn't moving quick. Said she was gonna give everybody a hug and at least say hello and speak to them as they come through her line. Yeah, we need a lot more of that kind of attention, so I just thought I'd stop and mention hers right here because I had read about it on there. I bet she was a good woman to be around, positive woman. Just thought I'd throw that in there because I did come across it, and I think we all need a little more positivity in our life nowadays. Mr. Holland Jr. Taylor. Didn't know Mr. Holland, but I did notice his plaque at the bottom here. BM1 U.S. Navy, World War II. Mr. Holland was 85 years old when he passed. Oh, Mr. Paul Miller. Mr. Paul not only was a veteran, Mr. Paul served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam conflict. He's got another child buried here in this cemetery, which I also knew, Mr. Tommy Harris. Mr. Paul was involved in all kind of fundraising activities, from veterans to, I remember Mr. Paul from the Elks Lodge, different things. He was always involved in functions. Didn't matter what it was, he was there. He was involved in it if it could help somebody. Chicken dinners, chicken cooking, I mean, it just, everything. Matter of fact, they've even got a soldier sitting on the top. I know Mr. Paul's son, he's got another son close to my age. Mr. Paul's also got a son, I'm pretty sure, Joel Miller. Mr. Joel, we'll be seeing his later. Mr. Joel's buried down, I believe, at what's called Indian Springs Cemetery. Miss Jenny Revels. Now, Miss Jenny's family owned my blood grandfather, the Theater Revels from Mayo. I knew Miss Jenny quite well. We went to school together, growed up together. Jenny's mother was always around. I've always seen her. She married a pretty good named Mr. Walt. Mr. Walt recently passed also. But Miss Jenny, I remember Miss Jenny from way back in the school system. Miss Jenny was a self person. She wasn't one of those caught up in everybody else. Miss Jenny was living, just trying to take care of Miss Jenny. So she was a very unique person, a great person. They used to come in the store with their grandmother and Mr. Walt, Miss Patsy and Mr. Walt. So Mr. Walt would always make it a point every now and then. He'd need something in the store, he'd come in, he'd hang out, and he'd talk. Mr. Walt worked in the logging industry. Walter Johnson, I believe Walt's last name was Johnson. I'm 99% sure it was Johnson. They are a distant family to me, and I knew Miss Jenny. Worked around Jenny's mama a little bit, interacted with that family. And one positive thing about Jenny's mama is, over the years, anytime I'd seen her, she'd always made sure when she knew that I was old enough to understand that I knew that Jenny was my cousin and knew that I had family on that side. Even though I already knew, she made sure, you know, and she always mentioned that. And I hadn't seen Miss Pat in a while, to be honest, since I changed jobs from the feed store much. I don't even know that I would recognize her if I seen her. Great family, great family. They got roots not just here in Perry, but over in Mayo. So not only are they Taylor Countyans, they Mayoians too. Warren Edward Martin. I didn't know Mr. Martin, but I just happened upon him here whenever we were coming through and seen he was a veteran. He was a veteran of the U.S. Army. He was a private during World War II. He was 77 years old when he passed. Mr. Warren Edward Martin. Furlan, I know Mr. Furlan. And his wife, Miss Dina. I remember Miss Dina from the store. She was married to Mr. Furlan, which was Mr. Fred and Helen Stevens' son. They were customers to me at the store. So were Mr. Fred and Miss Helen. And that's Mr. Fred. They used to buy a lot of livestock feed from me. Mr. Fred was a loyal customer, very loyal customer. So was Miss Helen. I don't know. I thought she had passed too, but she may not have. It's a relatively small cemetery. Mr. Martin Howard Kelly. I didn't know him either, but based on the fact that he did have a veteran plaque here, I just thought we would stop and take note of that. He was 78 years old when he passed. Served in the U.S. Army during World War II. So, you know, all these veteran plaques, sometimes they lead you to stories and things about these people. this also ties into your history. So that's the kind of things that you look for here when you're in these places. Even if you don't know the people, look for what's on their stones, and that will lead you to a lot of the history and information. And old Tommy Harris. Most everybody in Perry in our age group knew Tommy. Tommy was older than me, but Tommy was all around Perry. Tommy was always working. It didn't matter if it needed to be a job to put on a pair of blue jeans and some boots, or put on some dress slacks with a sales pitch. Tommy was a good all-around guy, hard worker. I knew Tommy's wife. I used to work at Martin Electronics with her. Tommy's daddy, Mr. Paul, one of Tommy's brothers. A couple of Tommy's brothers, actually, I knew. He always strived to achieve more and improve himself and try to help people around him. Tommy was a very kind-hearted guy. Tommy was 45 when he passed. Great guy. So that's about all on this cemetery. Got the granddaughter Brooklyn with us today. We might ride down and do Indian Springs Cemetery. Gotta see what the time looks like. I appreciate y'all joining me.